The desert winds howled across the barren plains of Mesopotamia, carrying with them the whispers of an ancient past long buried beneath the sands. In the dim glow of a flickering campfire, Dr. Elias Hartley tightened the straps of his gloves, his eyes fixed on the excavation site ahead. It was the most significant find of his career, a hidden chamber beneath the ruins of an uncharted ziggurat. What lay inside, however, was far beyond anything he or his team could have prepared for. The air grew heavier as they descended the narrow passageway, lit only by the glow of headlamps. Dust floated like spectral orbs, and every footstep echoed into the abyss. At the end of the tunnel, a colossal stone door loomed, carved with symbols that predated known Sumerian script. Symbols that looked eerily familiar but undeniably foreign. The team exchanged glances. "Dr. Hartley," called Emma Price, his lead linguist. Her voice was strained, half-choked by the dense air. These aren't Sumerian glyphs. They're something else. This isn't from any known civilization." Her eyes darted over the carvings, her fingers tracing their jagged edges. "Look at these patterns. They resemble genetic markers." "Impossible," Hartley muttered, but his heart pounded in his chest. "Are you suggesting these carvings represent DNA strands?" His words felt ridiculous as he spoke them, but Emma's silence was confirmation enough. After hours of careful maneuvering, the team managed to pry the stone door open. The sound of ancient stone grinding against itself echoed like thunder. A cold gust of air rushed out from within, carrying with it the stench of earth, copper, and something sharper, something like iron. The team's lights swept across the chamber's interior, revealing walls adorned with murals that defied logic. Creatures of humanoid form, adorned with golden headpieces and cloaks of shimmering scales, hovered over kneeling human figures. Their eyes glowed with a haunting blue light, even in the dim beams of the headlamps. "Are those?" whispered Ravi Patel, the team's anthropologist, his voice trembling. He didn't have to finish. Everyone knew what he was thinking. The figures on the walls were not human. Their limbs were elongated, their skulls larger, their faces too angular. They bore a striking resemblance to descriptions from modern UFO sightings. "Record everything," Hartley barked, pulling out his field camera. The flash illuminated the room in staccato bursts, each pulse revealing more of the alien tableau. Emma's fingers worked feverishly at the edges of the murals, hoping for a hidden compartment, or a clue. But then, something caught Hartley's eye, a small pedestal in the center of the room. Upon it rested a cylindrical object encased in glass. It looked like a canister, but the contents inside swirled with a golden-green glow. His breath hitched. It wasn't just ancient artwork. It was technology. "Is that a containment unit?" Emma stepped forward, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her gaze darted from the murals to the canister. "Doctor, that looks like a biological sample." She reached for it, but Hartley pulled her back. "Don't touch it," he ordered, eyes locked on the swirling substance within. "This chamber has been sealed for thousands of years. If this is organic matter, we have no idea how it might react to exposure." But his scientific curiosity betrayed him. His hands hovered closer to the glass as his mind raced. The swirling liquid inside shifted, as if it had noticed him. His eyes widened. "Did it just move?" The team gasped. Ravi stumbled backward, his light shaking in his hand. "Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me I didn't just see that." "You saw it," Emma said breathlessly, eyes locked on the glowing fluid. "It's reacting to us." Suddenly, the glow intensified. Symbols on the wall, once inert, flickered to life, glowing with the same golden hue. The patterns pulsed in sequence, like a heartbeat, each pulse stronger than the last. The room vibrated. Emma screamed as the ground shuddered beneath their feet. Ravi shouted, "Get out of here!" But it was too late. The canister began to hum. It wasn't a vibration but a low, resonating frequency that passed through their bones. Emma clutched her head. "It's in my mind!" she gasped. "I can hear it. It's like it's talking." Hartley's vision blurred. The pulse of the chamber grew faster, the vibrations threatening to shatter their eardrums. The glow became blinding. And then, in a moment of sudden, absolute silence, everything stopped. Breathless, they stared at each other, their faces slick with sweat and dust. The glow from the murals had faded. The hum from the canister had gone silent. But the cylinder was now empty. The glow was gone. Where did it go? Emma's voice was no more than a whisper. Her wide eyes darted around the chamber like a hunted animal. Ravi stepped back, his face as pale as ash. No, 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 he stammered. It's in us. It's inside us now. Hartley's eyes darted to the murals once more. The humanoid figures with glowing eyes hovered above the humans below them. His heart sank with dread. They weren't gods. They were something far, far worse. The camp outside the ziggurat had descended into a state of quiet unease. The team sat in a tense circle around the fire, their faces lit by the soft, flickering glow of the flames. Dr. Elias Hartley sat apart from the others, his eyes fixed on the night sky. The constellations above seemed sharper, more vivid than before. Stars he never remembered seeing suddenly felt familiar. His gaze lingered on one bright point of light, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt as though it was looking back. Something's wrong, Ravi muttered, rubbing his temples. His eyes darted toward the dark silhouette of the ziggurat in the distance. I've had migraines before, but this feels like someone's clawing inside my head. Emma sat across from him, hunched forward with her hands pressed tightly against her ears. It's not just you, she groaned. It's like a signal, like static, but inside my skull. I keep hearing this tone. Her breath was shallow, eyes darting wildly, pupils dilated far beyond normal. It keeps repeating, over and over. Stop talking about it, Ravi snapped. You'll make it worse. His breathing was shallow, his nerves visibly frayed. The wind howled through the canyons of stone behind them, but it wasn't just the wind anymore. There was something else in it. A low, droning hum that had been present since they left the chamber. Hartley finally spoke, his voice sharp and deliberate. It's not in your heads. It's real. He stood, his eyes fixed on Emma and Ravi, his expression grim. Whatever was in that chamber, it's not just ancient gas or spores. It's active. It's intelligent. Emma's face twisted with disbelief. Are you saying that liquid, that glow, it was some kind of life form? More than that, Hartley replied, his eyes now locked on the ziggurat's shadow. It didn't just leave the chamber. It left a mark on us. He tapped his temple. Think about it. The symbols on the wall lit up when we were close. It wasn't random. It responded to us. To our presence. It wasn't ancient art, it was a system. A system designed to recognize us. Emma shook her head, her voice brittle with fear. If it's in us, then what does it want? Ravi snorted, his fear bleeding into anger. What do you think it wants, Emma? It's probably using us as hosts. It's always the same. Every sci-fi story ever. Alien parasite, mind control, next thing you know, one of us turns into a monster. His voice cracked, and he glanced toward the ziggurat like it might suddenly burst to life. We shouldn't have opened it. We never should have opened it. Silence followed. Only the crackling of the fire and the distant hum remained. Hartley felt it too, the unshakable sense of being watched. His eyes scanned the horizon. Nothing but dunes and the jagged silhouette of ancient stone ruins. But something was watching them. He knew it in his bones. It was the same sensation he felt when a predator was lurking, silent but present. Gear up, he ordered, his voice tight with urgency. No one's sleeping tonight. If we're being watched, I want to be ready. Watched by what, Doctor? Ravi spat, his eyes wild. There's nothing out here but rocks, sand, and bad decisions. He pointed toward the ziggurat. If anything's watching, it's in there. No, Emma whispered, her eyes fixed on the fire, her body completely still. Her breath came in slow, shallow draws. Her eyes didn't blink. It's already out. It's here. Right here. They all went quiet. Ravi leaned forward, his hands on his knees, his eyes narrowing as he followed her gaze. Emma? You okay? He asked cautiously. Sure, she said softly, her eyes still locked on the fire. Her lips moved slowly, her voice distant like someone talking in their sleep. It's learning. Emma, Hartley said firmly, stepping forward. Look at me. Her head tilted slightly, but her eyes didn't meet his. Her pupils were too wide, swallowing most of her irises, making her eyes appear like two voids. Her lips twitched into a half-smile, but it wasn't her smile. It was too sharp, too unnatural, like she was mimicking an expression she'd seen but didn't understand. Language, she murmured, her voice glitching like a bad radio signal. Primitive, but sufficient, acceptable interface. Her head jerked slightly, like a puppet being pulled by strings. She blinked once, then twice, each time slower than the last. Compliant host, motor function adapting, vessel capacity adequate. Emma! Hartley shouted, grabbing her shoulders and shaking her. Her head snapped forward, eyes locking with his. But it wasn't Emma looking back. Something else stared through her, peering into him, analyzing him like data on a screen. You! Dr. Elias Hartley, designated observer, you will suffice. Her lips curled into a smile too wide for her face. Her teeth bared like a predator's snarl. We see you now. Hartley stumbled back, his heart pounding in his ears. Get away from her! Ravi, grab her now! Ravi didn't move. His eyes were locked on Emma, his face pale with shock. I don't think that's Emma anymore, document. Emma's head tilted in that same unnatural, bird-like motion, her eyes fixed on Hartley. No. It is not, she confirmed in a voice that was a mix of Emma's and something hollow, something vast. You have awoken us. Your kind are interesting. Her neck cracked as she tilted her head further, bones moving in a way human bones should not. Your minds are so fragmented. Her gaze flicked to Ravi, then back to Hartley. We prefer it this way. Ravi bolted, spinning on his heel and sprinting toward the camp's far edge. Nope. Nope. Nope, he shouted, his breath sharp and ragged. I'm not dying here. I'm not. His scream cut short. A sharp, metallic clang echoed across the dunes. Hartley spun toward the sound, heart racing. Ravi was on the ground, his limbs twisted at unnatural angles. His body convulsed once, and then he lay still. No! Ravi! Hartley sprinted toward him, but halfway there, he skidded to a stop. Emma stood over Ravi's body, her head still tilted, eyes locked on Hartley. She didn't chase him. She didn't have to. She raised one hand, her fingers twitching in quick, spidery movements. The air shimmered around her fingers, and a faint golden glow radiated from her palm. Her eyes narrowed. Run, she whispered. Run so we may hunt. Hartley turned and bolted into the night. His breath came in gasps as he sprinted over the dunes, his heart thudding like a war drum. Behind him, the low hum returned, not from the chamber, but from the sky itself. The stars above flickered, momentarily shifting position, like they were reconfiguring. One of the stars moved. It wasn't a star at all. It was a shape, triangular, moving silently across the night sky. It didn't blink. It didn't waver. It followed. He reached for his radio, fumbling with it as he ran. His fingers shook as he pressed the call button. Base camp! Base camp! Emergency! We have a code black. Repeat, code black. Do you copy? Static filled his ears, but behind the static, something else broke through. A voice. His own voice. Repeated back to him. Emergency. Code black. Do you copy? It was his voice, but it wasn't. It had the same distortion, the same hollow, mechanical mimicry he'd heard in Emma's voice. His blood ran cold. We copy, Dr. Hartley. The radio replied in his voice. The glow in the sky grew brighter. He knew what it was now. It wasn't a ship. It was an eye. They had seen him. They had seen all of them. The wind howled like a living beast, clawing at the dunes as the pale glow from above intensified. Dr. Hartley ran with every ounce of strength he had left. His breath came in ragged gasps, and his vision blurred from the strain. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the very air around him had thickened. The distant hum from the sky had grown louder, deeper, like the resonating thrum of an ancient machine spinning to life. Behind him, the sound of footsteps crunched steadily over the sand. Not hurried. Not rushed. Steady. Calculated. Emma, or whatever had become of her, was following. Not running. Just walking. It was worse than being chased by a predator. Predators had urgency. This was control. This was patience. Base camp! Respond! Hartley shouted into his radio, his voice hoarse with desperation. This is Dr. Hartley. Code Black. I repeat, Code Black. We have a hostile, non-human presence. Do you copy? Respond! The static hissed back at him, louder this time. But the hiss wasn't random anymore. It pulsed. It had rhythm. A pattern. Slowly, a voice emerged from the noise. This is Dr. Hartley. Code Black. Code Black. Do you copy? His own voice. Mocking him. Repeating his words with perfect clarity, but layered with something deeper, something ancient and vast. He ripped the radio from his vest and hurled it into the sand. Stay out of my head! He bellowed, his voice cracking from the strain. His heart felt like it would burst from his chest. The cold desert night wasn't cold anymore. His body burned from exertion, his lungs begging for relief, but he couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. He glanced back over his shoulder, eyes darting for Emma. She was closer now, her figure illuminated by the golden glow of the sky above. Her movements were wrong, her arms too stiff, her head tilting with slow, deliberate precision, like something was still learning how to use the body. Her eyes glowed faintly, the pupils shimmering like liquid metal. She wasn't walking toward him anymore. She was gliding, her feet barely touching the sand. Not real. This isn't real, Hartley muttered, shaking his head as he ran. Spores. Hallucination. Brain chemistry. It's the chamber gas. It's not her. Is that what you believe, Dr. Hartley? The voice was Emma's, but it echoed in his mind like a thought he didn't invite. His steps faltered as his mind reeled. Shut up! He screamed, pressing his hands to his ears, but it didn't help. The voice wasn't coming from outside. It was inside him. You're not real! We are more real than you have ever known, Emma's voice replied. You have seen only shadows on the wall. Now you see the fire. The glow from above intensified, painting the desert sands in hues of pale gold and violet. The shadows of the dunes stretched long, twisting and contorting like grasping fingers. The humming sound changed, growing sharper, like the chorus of countless voices all singing one endless note. His ears throbbed from the pressure, his teeth vibrated, and every step felt like he was running through water. The glow moved. It was moving. Hartley risked another glance upward. The triangular shape that had hung in the sky like a silent sentinel was no longer still. It was descending. Slowly. Purposefully. No lights blinked. No engines roared. It simply moved, an object so vast that his mind struggled to measure its size. The glow wasn't coming from it. The glow was part of it. It was alive. No, 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 no! Hartley's voice broke into a sob, and he stumbled, nearly falling. His legs burned with lactic acid, but fear drove him forward. Adrenaline pumped like fire through his veins. He had to reach the old supply shed on the far edge of the dig site. There was a satellite phone in there. A direct line to the off-site support team. If he could just make it. A sharp, searing pain shot through his right leg, and he collapsed face first into the sand. His scream echoed across the empty expanse as he clutched at his calf. His fingers found the source of the pain. A sharp, needle-like shard of obsidian jutted from his leg. It hadn't been there before. It hadn't been there. His heart stopped. He looked back toward Emma. Her hand was raised toward him, fingers spread, twitching like she was conducting an orchestra only she could hear. Her head tilted, her eyes narrowing like a predator locking on to prey. She did this. He knew it. Somehow she'd done it. He yanked at the shard, gritting his teeth against the pain. Blood seeped into the sand, the dark crimson almost black in the low light. His vision swam, but he didn't have time for pain. He pulled himself to his feet, his injured leg trembling under his weight. He could still run. He had to run. "There is no escape, Dr. Hartley," the voice whispered, softer now, like a lullaby. "You are a vessel. You are a bridge. The others were not suitable, but you will carry us home." "Shut up," Hartley hissed, dragging his leg through the sand. His teeth were clenched so hard his jaw ached. Every step sent a jolt of agony through his body, but he moved. He didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The shed came into view. A small, rusted structure half buried in the side of a dune. Safety. A lifeline. He reached for it like a drowning man reaching for a rope. 10 more steps. 5. 3. His fingers gripped the cold metal of the door handle, and he yanked it open, throwing himself inside. The scent of rust and old machinery filled his lungs. He slammed the door shut and locked it, his back pressed tight against the cold metal as he gasped for air. His body trembled, every muscle on the verge of collapse. The silence was deafening. No footsteps. No hum. Just the sound of his own heartbeat thudding in his ears. He crawled to the workbench at the back of the shed, his hands fumbling over the tools and scraps. His fingers found the satellite phone. His heart surged with hope as he flipped it on. Come on, he whispered, dialing the emergency frequency. His breath came in shallow bursts. Each second felt like an eternity. Static filled the line, then a sharp click. "This is Dr. Elias Hartley," he barked, his voice frantic, on the edge of tears. "Code Black. I repeat, Code Black. Hostile non-human entity. I need immediate evac. Respond! Respond!" Silence. Then, "This is Dr. Elias Hartley. Code Black. Hostile non-human entity." His heart stopped. His blood ran cold. It wasn't the radio. It was his voice. It was coming from behind him. Slowly, he turned. Emma stood in the center of the shed, her eyes glowing softly, her head tilted at that same unnatural angle. Her smile was too wide for her face. Her lips didn't move, but her voice filled the room like an intercom broadcast. "You cannot run, Dr. Hartley. You cannot hide. You are already home." His hand shot to the workbench, gripping the first tool his fingers found, a wrench. He raised it in trembling hands, his breath rapid, his eyes darting for an escape. "Stay back," he warned, voice cracking. "Stay away from me." She didn't move. Her eyes bore into him, unblinking, unyielding. "You misunderstand," she said. "We are not here to harm you, Dr. Hartley. We are here to become you." The light from above poured through the cracks in the shed, golden rays illuminating the air like dust motes suspended in water. The glow intensified, filling the room.